Good morning and welcome to our webinar. Hello everyone, and obviously thank you for joining. This is our Road to Recovery post-COVID-19, and this webinar series is part of the Open Table In It Together webinar series. This is bringing together industry leaders from the hospitality community, and we're excited, very excited today to have Pardo from Ibérica and Vivek Singh from the Cinnamon Club. Thank you very much for joining, and we'll have some introductions shortly. My name's Scott Hudson, and I'm one of the directors here across the EMEA region for Open Table. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping rules for you. If you do have any questions during the webinar, not sure where it is on your screen, but there is a Q&A engagement tool that you can put a question in on there. We'll do our best to answer as many of these as we can. We may run out of time, and during the dry run, it was a fantastic conversation, so I'll do my absolute best to keep us to time, but we will have some time at the end for some Q&A. But if we don't get around to all of those questions, then we will most definitely send out a follow-up email for you. And those questions we will keep them anonymous, so please, 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 no matter what question you have, feel free to answer it. We won't call out your names on that front. You will also see, or we'll talk about potentially some resources, and you'll see a resource list as well on your screen. And the last point, this webinar will be recorded. We won't take offense if you want to drop off and not be part of a recorded webinar, but it does just mean then that we can make this on demand at a later date, or if one of you does have to unfortunately drop off, you can then catch the rest of it. So without further ado, let's get started. It's been several weeks since restaurants reopened their doors and started welcoming guests back in to dine in the restaurant following months of closures. Since then, the way the country's dined out has changed radically, and there have been many new rules and regulations for restaurants to navigate. From operating social distancing measures in place, understanding reduced capacities, of new hygiene protocols, and that's just to name a few. Operating the hospitality industry has never been more challenging, and everybody is having to adapt. I think about even from an Open Table perspective, we've updated all our suite of products. We've introduced a whole raft of new financial support packages, effectively wiping out all fees until the end of 2020. And from the conversations that I'm having, it's exactly the same across all operators and suppliers across the whole industry. Today, with our guests, Vivek and Marcos, we'll look at how those first few weeks have gone for them since they started opening their doors to in-house diners, how they're adapting, what they've learned, and what they're doing differently now to get used to the new normal. And how many times will I say new normal today? How many times are we all probably saying new normal? But we'll try and understand what that is for our esteemed guests, and share some of their thoughts and how they're going to continue their road to recovery. So enough from me. Hand it over now to a couple of introductions from my guests, from Vivek and then Marcos. If you could just introduce yourselves and just let anybody that doesn't know on the call who you are and the type of restaurant or restaurants that you operate before we get into the questions, that'd be fantastic.
Marcos, would you like to go?
Yes, so I'm Marcos Fernández. I run two brands, Ibérica Restaurants and ArrosQD. They both focus on Spanish cuisine. Ibérica has 7 restaurants in London, Leeds, Manchester, Glasgow, and we are basically on the premium casual market. And then ArrosQD is a premium type restaurant that just opened 6 months before shutdown, and we'll start relaunching now.
Marcos, sorry, could you just speak up slightly? We just lost you a little bit there. I do apologize.
Okay, so I'll start again. So I'm Marcos Fernández. I run Ibérica Restaurants. We have 6-7 restaurants, mainly in London, Leeds, Glasgow, Manchester. And we also run ArrosQD, which is a new concept that we launched just before COVID, and we're playing within the premium casual to the premium market.
Fantastic.
Right. Fantastic.
Fantastic.
I'm Vivek Singh. I'm the executive chef and CEO for Cinnamon Collection. We're a collection of 5 restaurants and 3 different brands, 3 different price points. Starting off from the Cinnamon Club in the old Westminster Library in London. That was our flagship. That was the first one we opened. We went on to open Cinnamon Kitchens, which are more accessible, modern Indian restaurants, so to say, combining innovative cooking techniques and so on. We have 3 of those sites, one in the city, one in Oxford, and one by Battersea Power Station. And then we have Cinnamon Bazaar, which is our most accessible of all restaurants. So between the 5 of them, they all have different menus, different price points, but they all kind of are born out of the same ethos of innovation, of creativity, that of bringing something new in the Indian dining scene to our audiences. So that's where we are.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for those introductions. And to kick us off, Marcus, could you maybe just give us an overview, a highline overview of how you found it since that first day that you reopened to take diners into the restaurant? Like, how's it been for you?
Well, it's been challenging, of course. We've had to first of all retrain all our staff. We've got good training mechanisms, and obviously adapt all our operating procedures to what is the new normal. We are going a bit overboard in relation that we want to create environments that our customers recognize as safe in a midterm view. So we believe that what we do in these months is what will sustain or not our trade going forward. And then we've seen a initial surge. Obviously, people wanted to go out as the restaurants opened, and then that was stabilized around 40%. The new government promotion is obviously bringing trade into the Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and introducing new customers to our restaurants. But we'll see how that turns into trade when that assistance finishes. And that's roughly in a nutshell. We believe that we will continue growing as people get more accustomed to feeling safe in these environments. We'll talk about how that curve works, I think, further on down the webinar, because I think we'll also talk about e-commerce and those aspects.
Absolutely. And Vivek, for you, any kind of general things or points that have stood out to you? But generally, how's it gone since you reopened the doors and welcomed back your diners?
Yeah, I mean, quite similar, but in the main, my huge realization was the connect that we had with our audiences and how warmly that they welcomed being able to actually not just go out and eat restaurants, but before, actually almost a month before we welcomed diners in to our premises, we were open for delivery and takeaway. And just the general uptake and the reception to that was a great sense of gratification for everything that we've been doing in the communication and the relationships that we'd established with our audiences in the last 19 or 20 years. It definitely did a lot to enforce or reinforce and remind us of the values that we stood for. So that was a huge big tick, big sort of sense of joy, euphoria for the guests as well as for the teams. And I think that was something that I found incredibly satisfying. Not really worrying about when things open, do people really want to go out or not? So the warm reception we received was an absolute joy. And then, of course, right after that and right behind that was the thing about, oh yes, all this love is great, but what are we going to do and how are we going to cope with keeping everyone safe? And I mean everyone being everyone, right from the guests to the teams to people who are looking for some sort of an assurance, whether they're looking on the websites, whether they're looking on the booking portals. how much information and how quickly can you have the information accurate in your processes. There's been a steep learning curve from an operator point of view, but one that is better for both operators as well as customers, because customers need to have that confidence when they're making those choices. And I think the teams need to feel safe enough to want to come back to work. And those were the quick sort of steep learning we found in the first month. And thereafter, it's been this sort of constant, feeling your way through the ever-changing regulation, ever-changing safety measures, and just making sure that we operate as responsible operators should.
Okay, and staying with that theme then, Vivek, I think that's it's a nice kind of move into the next question that we had, and I think this is something that a lot of people are interested in. What were some of the challenges that you actually faced from the moment? Because obviously, I know there was this whole host during the lockdown period and adapting and doing things differently, and then the excitement, as you say, of opening those doors for the first time. Can you talk us through then what's actually happened from a challenge standpoint between when you open the doors to now, and what are some of the things that you've had to keep evolving and changing as you've been going? And I know it's only been 4 weeks, but I think as we were discussing earlier, so much changes day to day at the moment.
Yeah, we must use the term the new normal at least 4 times in the course of every single week, because every day seems to be like throwing something new at you. Be it in terms of diner behavior, be it in terms of people, the kind of choices people are making, what kind of restaurants do they want to go to, what kind of localities do they want to go to. I mean, the one thing for sure that's kind of, that I have learned and realized that at the start of COVID-19 and the start of the lockdown process, everything that every pundit said or sort of predicted for London has it's just completely been turned on its head. People said London would be the last one to go into recession and the first one to come out of it. London is an economy, a country into its own, and it'll not see the recession or the impact of COVID as the rest of the country will. And we're seeing that all of those things are wrong. I think Central London restaurants have completely different set of challenges to what a lot of the other operators might be experiencing. I think people have genuinely, in the lockdown, I mean, of course, they've all been locked down and they've had this sort of pent-up appetite, hunger, appetite for going out and all that. That's great. That's been good. But when they're coming out of it, I think they're generally going to be a lot more considered, and they want to stay local. It's not yet kind of going out to Central London touristy hotspot. That's not sort of come back yet, and I think that's reflected in the kind of occupancy and the appetite and the demand for Central London restaurants. So that's been a big challenge for some of my estate to kind of navigate and maneuver around. The other thing I'm finding is that slightly more residential locations have just been lapped up, and they're seeing a lot of growth and a lot of and the challenge there is to continue to be able to serve all these guests and all these number of people and give them a great experience, but also do so safely. So I think every restaurant, even within the same group and the same chain, has a slightly different behavior pattern. Did I answer your question?
Yes, and some. Very much appreciate that. And the same to you, Marcus. Like, is there anything that you've had to change and keep reevaluating that might be different to what Vivek mentioned?
No, I mean, I can coincide with Vivek a lot. I think that at the end, the restaurant industry has to not. It's not something that you're going to have to be doing just once. It's something that we're going to have to be doing during the next 12 months. So the actual consumers are being affected by 3 different influences. One is the risk perception. That can be very at the beginning of COVID, we were all in the high risk area. Now we're spreading out as a society to people that do believe in risk, or that believe that they don't have any risk, to people that still feel that they have that risk. And we're going to have to be able to adapt our products to cater to all those different purchasing decisions, we're going to also have to adapt. And I'm going to insist, as Vivek is, in that we have to act responsibly as restaurants and adapt our restaurants and our operating procedures to provide that sustained security to people. And I think that it's not just for the benefit of our own businesses, but for the benefit of the industry as a whole. Then on the other side, obviously, we will see two other effects that have still not settled down in relation to today. Residential actually showing much more growth, or a lot of growth, and some restaurants in residential areas actually being up year on year, because a lot of people are also working at home, and they'll be using the restaurants that they have close to what is now their new workplace. What shape that will take going forward, I think that we have to be slightly realistic and understand that the centres of town will no longer have that many workers constantly. People will mix between working at home and working in the office. So I think that depending on what type of operation you run, if you're a casual or premium or not, you will work better in the centre or work better into residential. And that's something that we're going to have to be seeing as we go. So really, the key thing into our models is building flexibility within the profit and loss, but also building flexibility within the products and services that we provide. How can we now start providing those services elsewhere? So I think it's just an ongoing thing. No one has a crystal ball. The new norm has not been defined yet. It's being defined as we go.
It's still very fluid. It's so true.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, and Mark, I think you mentioned something that was really interesting to me when we were talking earlier, which is around how you've maybe had to repivot some of the business to maybe be a little bit more marketing focused, and that's a change that you acknowledge you've needed to make. Could you maybe talk about that a little bit and maybe explain why you felt you might need to make that change?
Well, I think that the whole thing, because when we're talking about opening, we've been open since April. The things that we've been open for are delivery, pre-cooked, and not just products, but now we're also developing services to try and take the services that we do in the restaurants into the homes. So I think that all that really started by ourselves questioning ourselves. What is it that we are? So, we are a company that provides gastronomic experiences before within the constraints of brick and mortar within a restaurant. But in the moment we question that thought, we already obviously acknowledged that we were doing catering already outside of our restaurants. And from there, we've had to develop ways of getting to our customers. And that started by joining in our customers who and providing both ingredients, recipes, but also video conferencing where they come with us. And then you take that whole process to the stage of someone who's very scared will only want to cook at home. Someone who's a bit less scared.
We're just losing you slightly. Sorry to interrupt, Mike. We're just losing you slightly again.
You are?
There we go.
Oh, sorry, there we go. So I was saying, so we are providing products that cater for the product. So for the purchasing decision that the customers will make according to their fear level. So someone who's very, very scared will only want to cook at home. We can join by providing specialist ingredients and also by providing video conferencing services so that they cook with us and with our chefs. The next level is people that will then feel that they do want to have pre-cooked food. And, we've catered that into two different segments. Then we go onto our catering, but then these channels, as people start going back into offices, we start producing products that then cater for people in the office. So it's how and to be able to do all that, we've had to completely change our company, and with that, obviously, a complete overhaul of the marketing team, because now we're not only marketing restaurants, now we are marketing, e-commerce, and our delivery businesses and services that we do through video conferencing. And we are now launching a online sommelier now. All the meat makers that we used to do with important winemakers or the key producers that we work with are now happening online, and that's another type of services that we are providing. So it's how the company can change to be able to tackle this massive uncertainty that we're all facing.
Yeah, and I think when we were talking about surprises, Vivek, like I think those added services now, delivery was something I think that you mentioned that particularly stood out to you. So it'd be great just to get your perspective, Vivek, on what the surprise maybe about delivery was, or how it maybe was different to what your expectation of it might have been, and maybe just any other things that have stood out to you since you've reopened that were a little bit of a shock.
That's a really good question. I've operated restaurants in central London for 19 odd years and close to 20 now. And as chefs, we've always turned up our noses at delivery, and it's never been a big part of thing. In fact, I actively never did delivery out of Cinnamon Club or for the initial Cinnamon kitchens. I only had delivery from two of my sort of newest restaurants, one in Battersea and one in Oxford. And pre-COVID, delivery was like that, so small, so tiny that you couldn't even, there was nothing worth writing home about. And it was just, we had it because that's where everybody said the market was going. You needed to have it, but I don't think it ever really caught up or was anything like it. And post-lockdown, when we opened, we were beating last year's numbers just out of delivery. Now, we realize it's a completely different world. You need to be able to order both these verticals. Of course, the ability for people to come and enjoy a really good experience within your premises and your environment, but also the ability, if they want to take this experience at home and enjoy it at their sort of time and in their environment, then they should be able to do that. And so a lot of the new stuff that we found, whether it's deliveries, whether for some operators it's home cooking kits, some it's products, and some, in my case, I've even done a couple of online cookery masterclasses. The cookery masterclasses I used to do in the restaurants were very, very popular, but we haven't been able to do them in person for the last 4 or 5 months, and there was a lot of huge pent-up demand. So, people wanted to do that, and I have ended up doing a few of these. Now, so all of these revenue streams or not, but streams nonetheless, are opening up to people. And I reckon some of this will stay. It's not, not all of this will fall off, but, as things develop and as things change, when people start coming back to offices, I think, they will want to have a lunch at the desk. So that might be a new thing coming in. And it means that, maybe lesser people are ordering a takeaway for dinner. That might happen, but these new things, new experiences, and new revenue streams that restaurants have found, a lot of them are here to stay. And I think for each restaurant it's going to be different. In each business is going to be different. They will find different things work really well for them. So the sommelier thing might, it's a fantastic idea, Marcus. And I think that's something that will stay. I think that will stay. When people have developed it and have got a taste for it. So yeah, that was these have been the sort of, learnings so far.
Yeah, and I think things like the masterclass over video and the sommelier, over the phone, like things that you can actually do at home, just generally, if you have small children or, if you just can't get out, like these are things you say that could well end up staying as we move into our new normal. That's my second time today. So, Marcus, is there anything on your side then that you were shocked about that kind of stood out to you, different to what you've already mentioned?
Do you know, this question is brings what I was thinking when you were saying surprises so many times, but things that when you have 20 surprises a day, they sort of stop being a surprise.
Yeah,
it's the reality that we're working with. So I think that in the moment we went in this process, we understood that we were just going to be walking on moving waters, on moving sand, and we're going to have to be able to just adapt and change very, very quickly. But we are a very creative industry, and we are a very young industry. So I think that we've got the talent and we've got the energy to be able to actually adapt quickly. And a bit like what Vivek was saying, this is giving us. It's not even giving us the opportunity. It's giving us the opportunity and has forced us to try things that maybe we wouldn't have tried because of this. So there is a silver lining to all this change.
Okay. And I suppose looking, forwards, to the next few weeks and so forth, what have you found that's been useful, that's been helpful? Like, what are the key things, or just some of the things you might be able to share with our audience that you have personally found that's been helpful right now, whether it's a resource, whether it's doing something in a certain way with suppliers and so forth? But Mark, if we could stick with you, is there anything you can share on that front that's been particularly helpful to you over these last few weeks, and in fact, maybe the whole period?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very difficult period, and there we're just not going into operating issues. We're going into corporate and balance sheet issues, that have been caused by COVID. And I think that we've had a very close relationship with our landlords, with our banks, and most importantly with all our suppliers who've understood the situation. But I think it's been by also on our side making a very open viability plan for everyone. I think that's one very important thing is deal with everyone around you. You yourselves, Open Table, have been helping us. Our PR company has had to change how they act to help us through all this process. Obviously, we've also been using new forms of interacting with our customers and keeping them engaged. And how can we not lose our customers who are at home, and how can we still keep something going on with them, so that they're ready to come back to the services that we provide. So I think that it's all that, and then I still insist again, it's the biggest help that any company has is its business, it's its team. Without our team and the effort that they've made to retrain themselves and to keep on changing themselves, nothing that we're doing now is possible. So those are the real helps that we pull on, mainly your team.
Okay. And Vivek, anything from your side to add to that you found particularly helpful?
Yeah, I mean, it became very evident even as COVID-19 and the entire sort of lockdown thing was unfolding. It became really evident that the world wasn't going to be the same when we return as we left it. Just pre-COVID. It wasn't. It was absolutely. In fact, it was quite evident to me very early on that this is something that isn't going to affect some and not the others. There isn't anybody who's going to be untouched by this. In fact, on the contrary, this was going to be it was an incredible leveling experience, because somehow the more successful you were as a business or as an operation or a site or a restaurant or whatever, the more successful you were faced with bigger challenges coming out on the other side with COVID, because you had more to adapt, you had more to lose, you had more covers to lose, you had more occupancy issues, you had thinner margins and so on. But so that was the challenging bit of it. If you have been running businesses a certain way and getting used to doing things a certain way, that is a challenge. But in the early days itself, I think the hospitality industry demonstrated how creative and how agile and how nimble they were in terms of adapting and very quickly, sort of stepping up to the plate to help others out. Where be it sort of sharing recipes over, or some people cooking for NHS and fundraising in hundreds of different ways over social media and beyond. Even during lockdown, I mean, it was an amazing reinforcement of the belief that this is an ecosystem that does help each other out. Be it suppliers, we've been very lucky. We had guests, we have teams that were brought in, but more importantly, the suppliers showed us that they really care, including Open Table. I have to say, it's been a real sort of a big weight off the shoulders for, with the support that Open Table has come up throughout and has conducted itself in a way that, shows and demonstrates that it cares for the ecosystem that it operates within. And I think that is where like-minded operators and players come in. That kind of continues. I think it's continuing even now with suppliers taking either a more commercial view or, having there's been a lot of good to come out of this from an ecosystem point of view. And I think that is very, very encouraging.
Agreed. It's just been fantastic to see everybody pull together, and definitely it's a really heartwarming moment, I think, to be a part of, as you say, a community that is pulling together so strongly to try and help each other. It'd be really interesting if you could maybe explain how you're seeing some of the diner trends change. Inevitably, we know that we know that people are changing the way that they're eating out, and I think we mentioned earlier even the latest government scheme, the Eat Out to Help Out, has had an instant impact in the way that it's changed some of your books over the last couple of weeks and so forth. Marcus, maybe to you, could you maybe just talk us through some of those initial trends that you've seen, and maybe some of the things that you're doing to capitalize on that, or some of the things you've had to do maybe to adapt to take advantage in a different way potentially?
Yeah, I mean, there's I think that there will be a permanent shift on how people consume in the center of towns in comparison to the residential areas. And I think that actually, as people go into offices more into a part-time working mode, where some of the days are spent on their homes working, I think that a lot of the sandwich on the desk days will be those days that happen in your home, and the more special occasion days, you will make them coincide to the days that you go into your hot desk in the city centre. So I think there will be a certain shift in the type of restaurants that operates and that operates successfully in the centre of towns, where I believe that they will be the more special occasion type of restaurants, and what will work better in the residential areas. I also, I was seeing, for example, news on Pret. I mean, if I was the CEO of Pret, I'll be a bit lost on how sandwiches will be consumed in the UK going forward. It's a question that I was trying to answer myself, and I really couldn't. I think that in relation, both with Vivek and I, we are more the special occasion type restaurant, and I think that there we will, that trade will come back probably quicker than we think. Because obviously, even if the office capacity is low, the occasions for our type of purchase will still be higher than of other type of restaurants. What other things we're actually counting is how do we approach those residential areas without having to make massive investments in property at this moment, and that's been our whole e-commerce and our delivery push, and we want to try and make it slightly more sophisticated. When we manage to identify waiters and chefs with antibodies, then we can provide catering at home, for example, in a more secure environment. So it's how can we tackle with that and those changes. And initially at this moment, I think that the aid that we're getting on customers with these £10 is introducing new customers to our restaurants, and hopefully we're able to retain those customers going forward. But we're also focused on how do we bring our customers back as they come in, and again we go back into being able to provide a safe environment for it is key for us. Yeah.
Okay, and Vivek, can you talk about some of the changes and trends that you've seen already?
The changes I've seen, and I have been sort of expecting it for some time now. It's, I think diner behavior is and dining sort of choices are going to be a lot more considered going forward. And that's no denying that. People will think a little bit more about how often they're eating out, what kind of restaurants do they want to go. I mean, the early indicators seem to suggest that people want to stay local and also support small businesses. So, that's definitely coming through in everything I'm seeing and whatever I'm hearing from speaking to guests and speaking to clients and what have you. So, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's quite good. I think if you take a step back, you will realize that, a lot of time people have been sort of stuck in their houses, no options to go out and no opportunities to order takeaway or deliveries for a long, long time. They've actually learned how to cook. They've been, inundated with things on social media and recipe shares and whatever else have you. And people have, kind of learned how to cook. So I suppose they have probably got a slightly better handle of how much things cost, if you were cooking them yourself. So, I think they will be looking for better value when they go to restaurants or the kind of restaurants that they choose. They will want to go to places where they're getting things that they can't do themselves or they can't buy those ingredients themselves. So that desirability will become quite a good driver going forward. The other thing is that, of course, people have also been cooking a lot and or perhaps even ordering takeaways a lot. And they realize how much hard work it is to be doing all the washing up and everything else. So I'm hoping that they will have a much increased, much improved appreciation of what a luxury it is to be waited upon in a restaurant, and they'll have a slightly better understanding and appreciation of it. And I think that is something that hopefully should bring them back to restaurants, saying, look, I can cook this myself or I can order the take-in, but I still have to do all the washing up. Where's the fun in that?
Agreed. And I think your point about, people wanting to support local businesses and dine local is something I think I agree with. We're hearing that and seeing that. And I think a lot of our campaigns over the next couple of months, are also geared in that way because it seems to be what people want right now, which I think is fantastic for the local businesses, as well. So just looking now, slightly time conscious, just to bring this to a little bit of a close. Just very quickly, I'm just intrigued to ask both of you, some of these new practices that you've brought in, like delivery in locations that you might not have done before, or, the Somalia and so forth, are you going to keep them for the foreseeable future? Or do you think there'll be an expiration date on them? Or you're just going to play them out and see whatever they continue to add value?
No, I think they will stay. And in our view, we're going to keep on evolving products. So I think it's more what the products and services through those channels, which ones of those stay. But in relation to the channels towards the customer, I think that the restaurants will have to have more than one channel and do services outside of their properties, without doubt. It's yeah.
Sorry. Me too. I think a lot of these things that we've introduced new, they will stay for as long as they need to stay or they have legs. And there might be some things that you've experimented with, and after a while you feel that there's not enough value in it, or there's not enough appetite for it, and they may fall off. But that is just business, life in business generally. So we will, for most of the new things that we've experienced and found, we're going to stick with.
Yeah. Great. All right. And one of those questions, I'm thinking about some of the conversations we've been having recently. We know September is maybe a date where some of those restaurants that might have waited to open up are looking at as an opening date. So for anyone who's listening who hasn't opened up yet, are there any little bits of advice that you think that you could give to them that you maybe wish that you'd have known just before you opened? But is there anything that you're saying to your colleagues, your friends, and people in the industry right now who are about to open that you could share that they might be able to take away and think about?
I mean, the first thing that I would do is start if they haven't already, start engaging with their customers before they open. So that there is that buzz going on, and they do understand, and they regain that trust from them, because then it's a matter of trust again. It's how do you provide a environment that is safe for your customers to go to. And I think that's the key thing, and how you communicate that to your customers, so they feel that your establish is one that where their risk level is as low as possible. And that customer engagement prior opening, I think, is fundamental, so that you have a successful opening before that happens. Okay,
and Vivek, same question to you.
I'd say to people, I don't think this is not a race to open or anything like that. If you haven't opened yet, if you didn't open on the 4th of July, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. For every operation, for every business, it's a different stage that they're at, and they might have a different time when it feels right, whether it's customer-led or it's based out of teams or risk or rents or whatever that might be. But I think the most important thing is to be optimistic and to be excited, and so getting the teams on side as well as the customer communication or the client communication. I think it's invaluable, as Marcus says. I think that's probably the first starting point, and the ability to be able to communicate and share all the changes that you made and all the steps that you've taken to make your business more safe for both the teams. And I think it's important. We talk about customers a lot, but also it's so relevant to teams. I mean, the teams have been locked up, cooped up, on furlough or, whatever that is. It is an uncertain time for them too. And when you reopen your doors, it's not enough to simply have customers. And if your teams aren't sort of kind of, either feeling it or feeling secure enough, then, you wouldn't be able to get the message across. So I think it's really important to get the communication channels open up. And I think if this is your purpose and this is what you do and this is your purpose in life and your business and your livelihood and everything else, then it's always better to open than stay closed.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, and final thoughts then before we move into the Q&A, and already seen some really interesting questions which I'm excited to put to you. But you both spoke so wonderfully about your teams at certain points during this call, and I know obviously they've been fantastic through all of this. But could you both maybe, and starting with you, Vivek, could you maybe talk about something that you have just been so impressed with? Maybe it's industry coming together, or is there anything that during this time that has just made you sit back and just think, wow?
Well, I think I mentioned it before. I have just completely been bowled over by the innovation in this industry and the creativity, the agility in terms of whether it's fundraising, whether it's supporting different causes throughout this process. I have been incredibly touched. I mean, there is a reason why hospitality people are the way they are. It's inherent in them to want to please others and help others where they can. And even in the most difficult of times, I have been so impressed by, the way there's so many sort of social media kind of chains and that went viral in terms of people cooking something on Instagram and then nominating 5 other chefs to donate £5 for a cause or the other. And there were so many of them that happened. They really caught. We must have raised hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds, for some very worthy causes. And I was really, really impressed by that. At a time when a majority of our industry was on its knees and not really sure or certain about what form it would come back in. Even at that time, we were able to think about others and assist. I think that was really, really heartwarming. So I mean, for me, I think that's the bit that I've been incredibly impressed by.
Yeah, it's been lovely. And Marcus, anything from you to close out?
I would agree with Vivek on that. And also just replicating something we've also said is how the actual industry, its suppliers, and everyone that actually feeds from this industry has been joining together in the effort of trying to see us all on the other side. And we can't forget also the customers, who I think that we are getting reports from all the restaurants that there's just a very different interaction with most customers. People are much more understanding, and people are much more appreciative of what we do for them, and what really making a dinner involved. And I think that, as Vivek said, they've had to be doing it for themselves for the past 3 months. So they've realized how challenging really it is to be able to make a memorable dinner memorable. And I think that all that is there. So there's very good sides onto all this.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much for that. So that brings to the end of our structured questions, and thank you for your insights and just being so candid and open and honest. Hopefully the audience have found it really interesting and helpful. The last kind of 10 to 12 minutes, I'd love it if you're okay, we just put some questions to you from the Q&A. And as I say, there's quite a few here that have come in that I'm quite interested to put your way. I think a really interesting one that's come up that I'd love to start with is just about how you think maybe the focus on sustainability and recycling, like, has that taken a back seat? And if you think it has taken a back seat, when do you think it might then come back to the forefront? Or do you think that it hasn't taken a back seat? But it'd be great to get, and starting with yourself, Marcus, it'd be great to get your take on that, the sustainability question during this period and where you stand with it now.
I was answering with my head already as you were placing the question. No, I think that's actually, and we spoke about that in our prior conversation before. I think that actually sustainability is more in the plate than ever. One of the main reasons for pandemic is how we consume animal protein and how we produce it. I think that the customer will become more and more aware that for our own survival, we need to change how we consume in this world and how we produce all that. I think actually also I'm not a vegetarian in the slightest, and I don't intend that our restaurants will be that. But I think that there will be by the customer a demand, and environmentalism will be forced by the customer, in that the own customer will be demanding higher quality protein to be eaten in less occasions, and the use of protein in a responsible way, recycling just the same as also waste. And I think that those will be things that will be demanded by the customer going forward.
Okay. And Vivek, to you on that front, the question of sustainability.
Yeah, I think the industry in general has come a long way, at least in the last 10 years or so, of taking some real positive steps towards sustainability, towards identifying ingredients, resource, whether it's packaging, whether it's transportation, so on. But that's not. It has done a lot of good, and we've come a long way. However, it would be amiss of me not to express my disappointment at as soon as COVID started and takeouts began, I just couldn't help but notice the amount of plastic that went straight back into the system. Whether it was sort of packaging containers, whether it was the delivery boxes, whatever it was. It just seems like we went into a shock, and at the moment somebody sees danger, or we have this tendency of sort of revert back to old behaviors. Suddenly, nobody was talking about sustainability or environmentally friendly packaging anymore. But I mean, being nimble and agile as the restaurant industry is, I started to start noticing in 6 weeks' time that more and more people were kind of questioning themselves about it took us 10 years to go to ditch the straw to go on to paper straws. So for us to then simply go back immediately in 6 weeks' time to our old ways of plastic boxes was not very nice. It wasn't a good sight. However, I think 6 weeks on, I started to notice a lot more attention and care into the packaging boxes and so on. So I think we will all kind of go back to being more aware and more careful about sustainability, and that's not going away. I think on a macro level, we all have to be, and we made some progress, but there's still so much to do.
Yeah, agreed. And staying with you, Vivek, could you maybe a couple of questions on this about landlords and maybe how to manage that relationship with a landlord when capacity is at 30%, but landlords are requiring 100%. Have you had any experience of that, or is there anything from your 20 plus years in the industry that you might be able to share that might help someone who's going through a problem like that right now? Putting you on the spot, I apologize.
No, not at all. It's not something that has ever happened before in the last 20 years in London. And this entire landlord-tenant sort of relationship is just been one way. It's always been upward only rent reviews and so on. So I don't think anybody, neither operators nor landlords, have had any experience of anything like this before. And which is one of the reasons why I hope that there is going to be some sort of a code of conduct or some sort of a guidance coming in from the government in terms of how to conduct these negotiations. Because in the absence of that, it could just be, a case of might is right. I mean, we're seeing, so we're hearing some news and some examples of people closing down, but not a lot of them because of rent-related issues. I think we're also hearing a lot of landlords trying to be proactive or making offers to the tenants to kind of come up with some sort of an arrangement. But I think it's all quite sporadic. What would help the industry is if there was a sort of a code of conduct around how these negotiations largely are going to go. But in terms of asking for a better deal, from a tenant point of view, asking the landlord for a better deal, or asking for that matter any supplier, any one for a better deal than what you had before, I don't think that's a wrong place to be at all, because what we're going through right now, 6 or so months of little or no trade out of, it's just unsustainable at the rents and rates, for that matter, that London throws at you. So it is. I think what I say is that I wish there was a code of conduct that kind of gives people a framework within which to operate. But in the absence of it, the next best thing is to have individual conversations, because even though landlords might not be physical sort of people that you talk to, but most organizations, most landlords are also faced up with the same thing, I imagine. It's not like if they threw an operator out today, there is a queue of other people wanting to take that premises. So, this whole upward only rent reviews and a complete sort of not moving on the positions is a thing of the past. I don't think is the way of the future.
Marco, is there anything to add to that from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that to a certain extent it would have been easier if the aid of the government had gone to the banks, from banks to the landlords, and a national timeout had been organised. But in the absence of that, it does create a very serious corporate problem in the balance sheets of companies that can put them straight into administration. That's the reality. Now, a situation, there is actually a code of conduct that has been published by the government, and I would encourage everyone to go to see that, because I think that's where their starting point with any landlord should be. But also let's understand the reality. I think that the best way to tackle a situation like this is to communicate with the landlord, and we communicate with our landlords from day one. It is also true that the type of businesses that they are and we are extremely different. They are a business that has been very stable in its income, but it's also a business that is very, very geared because of that stability. So they also have a cash flow problem that people need to understand and solve. And I think that our approach was to start conversations, and the first conversations weren't good because an industry like us is an industry that is accustomed to reacting quickly. An industry like theirs is an industry that takes less to react. But the reality is that landlords, in the moment they were given time to think the situation. So obviously the first 2 weeks in March were horrible. The last 2 weeks in March were easier, and coming April, things got easier, because we all understand that we're all in the same boat. And it is true that landlords and landlords are starting to understand that, their property values have fallen because there's less people on the street, full stop. Now, adjusting a business like that is difficult. So I think that the most important thing is to be open with your landlord, to go with an open viability plan where they're seeing your numbers, because they are at the end your main creditor, and they do deserve that if you want them to do an effort with you. So it's I would work hard in making your landlords your partners going forward, so that there is flexibility built into your P&L, but when good times come, they also enjoy those good times, and then when bad times come, they suffer with you. And I think that's how you need to shift your relationship with your landlord. Try to create a partnership, and you can only do that by conversation and by being open and by having an open book policy. We restaurateurs don't really have secrets in our numbers. We're not putting rockets in Mars or inventing a secret weapon. Our success is down to how good we are operating. And I also think that the relationship that you've had with your landlord in the past is going to matter a lot, because your landlord has to believe that you're someone that can come and can get through the next 12 months and then make a success of it, a success of 2021. So I think that that relationship. But let's not forget that there's another point, and I think that's a strength that the operators have today, is that if they go, the landlord will find it very, very difficult to find someone to take that space in the next 12 to 24 months. And if they do, it will be at new market prices. So today, the operators that are in the properties are in a distinctive advantage to reach a deal. But they need to reach a deal. Crossing and putting your head in the sand like an ostrich isn't going to get you anywhere.
Yeah. Agreed. I think some great advice there, especially around, communication.
Exactly.
All right. I think that probably brings this a few more questions. I think it would probably be best for us to give them an answer. We'll follow up with an email because there's a couple of meaty ones there, and I don't want to just rush them through. So I'd like to say thank you very much to the both of you today. Fascinating. I've had a few hours with you guys, and I could have a few hours more. It's really, really interesting. Thanks so much for your experience. As I mentioned earlier, your honesty and being candid. Hopefully our audience can take away some information from this that they can actually action and put into practice. So thank you very much indeed. We will send a follow-up email, as I say, with a recording and potentially any answers to any of the questions that we didn't get round to. So thank you very much. It's been our absolute pleasure. Best of luck to everybody out there, and we look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.